Welcome back to Wondour. Today I am with the fabulous Mr. Taylor Speegle. How are you, brother?
Doing fantastic.
Good. We have a very interesting article that was sent in through community. And by the way, if you are not a part of our community, if you're wondering how do we come up with the topics, it's because people like you send in the questions that are registered on our community number. That is 702-602-8802. And if you send in your questions, I will get this guy into the studio and we will answer those questions for you. And someone has sent me an article that I found fascinating because the reason why Meta rebranded Facebook is because of a lot of negativity behind it with the leaks and everyone's information and XYZ ABC.
Yeah.
Then this article is talking about how Meta already has spent $10 billion with a B in the metaverse. Taylor, 10 billion. It's a lot.
I could do a lot with $10 billion.
Yes.
I'll just say that much.
And then since Facebook to Meta, the evaluation has tanked, for lack of better words, of $500 billion. $500 billion they have lost in value. I mean, I don't know what those offices are like right now in California, but I mean, people have got to be a little scared right now.
Not a great earnings report now.
No. And then, so the reason what this article is talking about how Meta's going into Spain and France, and then they had a screenshot of this, you're going to talk about spending $10 billion.
Yeah.
And the screenshot is a very, not of quality.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So if it's for their Horizon Worlds platform, and so Google it. I think it was like a Twitter post by Mark Zuckerberg or a Facebook post. I would assume a Facebook post. But yeah, you look at the quality, and it looks like very rudimentary, almost like a child drew it, right, at first appearance. And there's like this kind of fairly poor resolution Eiffel Tower, and I think probably some Spanish church in the background. I agree with the high-level sentiment that people are also really enjoying of just bashing Meta.
They enjoy doing that.
It's a lot of fun, and I've watched videos of people out there just saying like, all the things they're doing wrong. I can't believe they could ever allow this to happen. I would say a bit more reasoned approach is
we have higher opinions prevailing right here. Let's go.
So a little bit in defense of Mr. Zuckerberg and the rest of Meta. So one thing on the rebrand, to Meta, I still think that was a positive move. First thing, Facebook is specifically one of their platforms that they started with, but then they bought Instagram and they're diversifying enough. So I think choosing a different term to define what your company is, separate from your individual products, I think that makes sense. You ditch some of the old garbage. And then, obviously, we've talked about a lot here is, the metaverse and the future of Web3 is the future, right? It's going to be huge in the future. So that bet, I don't think is a bad long-term bet. Short-term decisions may make that, questionable in terms of the stock slide, but I still think it's a reasonable long-term approach. And I don't know, we're assessing like a single post and a single screenshot. Let's start with the obvious. Should they have posted that with that resolution, given the expectations of consumers and the millions of people that will see it? I would elect no. Maybe someone in their PR marketing department could have beautified it a little bit, or could have touched it up, or chosen a different element. Sure, it sucks. That said, I think a few caveats. So one thing, if that's an actual capture from within their environment, just going into a virtual reality environment changes what those kind of more lower poly is a term, lower poly designs. So when you put it in a virtual reality environment, there's a sense of depth and presence and so on. So it makes it a little bit better. Additionally, they're at the very beginnings of building the entire infrastructure to support what their vision is. So Horizons and the larger social platform. So if you're spending $10 billion, yes, if all you were spending $10 billion on was basically what's represented in that screenshot, you wasted $10 billion. You could have done that for about a millionth of the price. But if you look at what they're building and spending that $10 billion on, it's hiring thousands of virtual reality developers and building an entire network and HR department and infrastructure in Eastern Europe and other parts of the world, and bolstering what's here in the United States. So people are expensive. And then you're also developing hardware. Hardware is hard. And so they're developing their own hardware devices. They obviously bought Oculus, and that's been rolled together. And they're trying to invent the next generation of hardware. With the next generation of hardware and firmware, you then have the developer platforms they're trying to build out. And so they're trying to make sure, okay, what is it like to be a developer of the future, and how are you going to interface with all of our new hardware? What does that look like? And then, so that's the whole operating system side of it as well. And then you're trying to build Horizon Worlds. So how do you create all the instances in which everybody's going to be communicating? Should you be rethinking what that architecture and infrastructure is like relative to what exists today and invent your own systems rather than necessarily licensing what already exists? You might need to rebuild what exists, improve upon it elsewhere in the world, acquire other companies. And so I think when you look at the grander picture, $10 billion on consolidated into that image, yeah, it looks absolutely atrocious, but I think the larger vision of what they're doing is still really exciting. And the fact that they're willing to invest $10 billion, I'd say the $10 billion they spend versus the $10 billion a government would spend is more efficient. Now, is it more efficient at a corporate level of what, let's say us, right, operating at a much smaller scale? No, I think the smaller your team, the smaller scale it gets, the more efficient you can become with every single dollar. But when you're trying to operate a giant ship and trying to move entire industries, you're going to have some inefficiencies, but the fact that a company of such value is willing to throw $10 billion of capital into the market, I think is incredible, because we're going to see the fruits of that labor not this year, right? You're seeing little glimpses of it, but maybe 2-3 years. You start to see their new headset technology come out, which includes far more higher resolution pass-through cameras. And so, putting it on, it doesn't just fully encapsulate your vision. It can also have high resolution depiction of the environment around you, allowing for things like mixed reality experiences to occur. And you have eye tracking taking place, and being able to reduce the form factor down to a much, much smaller level versus the larger headsets you have today. In my opinion, I want as many large corporations spending as much money as they can, as efficiently or as inefficiently as possible, flooding the market with this type of research, building out developer bases, getting more developers and designers into the world of virtual reality, into the world of the metaverse, because that increases our talent pool, increases innovations. All of those employees are going to spin off and start up their own companies eventually one day. And so that type of stuff is really, really exciting. So was it a bad HR or PR move to release that photo? Yes, the photo is garbage. Don't do that when you're launching an entire market. You just have like this little Eiffel Tower and like this random building in the background. And some people describe it as like soulless, like the metaverse is soulless. First thing, Mark Zuckerberg has never been one to like, his face does not convey it.
The most animated.
Yes, yep. Yes. You don't look into his eyes and see complexity
Heart and
depth.
warm and yeah.
Yes. Who knows? He has a wonderful family. I'm sure he loves dearly. But yeah, he's not the spokesperson for it. And then you convert that already kind of soulless disposition into an avatar, a low-resolution avatar. It doesn't add to it, right? You're compounding on the negative. But I've already seen, with people's concern, like, oh, the metaverse is soulless, is one of the claims with this post as well. It's certainly not. If anything, the metaverse, yeah, that representation, sure, may be soulless and stupid, but really, it's about staring at a video screen all day in like a two-dimensional plane. Well, that's soulless, right? That's not human. Human is like me sitting right next to you and seeing your facial expressions and seeing your eyes move. That's coming, right? Being able to experience each other in three dimensions exists. There's like a second home and VR chat. And there's an incredible world out there where obviously the metaverse is not soulless. And everybody's trying to contribute to the larger vision there. So I think it's the exact opposite of soulless, just smaller, kind of vertical slice representations of it coming out of Meta may not be the best benchmark to look at.
I have a couple layered questions. The first one I want to ask you is when you're talking about the hardware that they're developing and working on. Do you think the expectations of so we've had phones, cell phones for a while, and then the first smartphones came out, but it was really when Apple came out with the iPhone that all of a sudden then everyone came into the game. And then I remember when the iPhone came out, for me, and then maybe it's because I lived through this and I don't remember the reality, because from my point of view, as soon as the iPhone rolled out, from my point of view, everyone went crazy. It was a positive thing and everyone wanted a smartphone. Do you think that that's going to happen when Apple releases their VR headset? That's going to finally push everyone over, kind of like Apple kind of saying, guys, VR is a legit thing because we said it is? Like, where do you think that is? Or
so on Apple's side, I don't think the innovation, we'll see. So we've actually, some of our team that oversees our industrial design.
Dev kits, right?
Yeah. So we played with dev kits, but also on Apple stuff, we've looked at their patents. So some of our team, just because they're passionate, crazy passionate people, dug through their patents of what's actually been published with the USPTO to try to recreate what it is the Apple headset's going to look like. And there's only so many ways you can fit the pieces together, and we actually have visualizations, industrial design visualizations of our best guess of what that's going to look like. And based on those, I don't see anything remarkably transformative. I think that Apple often does, if I were to bet on, Meta versus Apple. From a headset and a hardware perspective, I'd choose Apple. Apple's a hardware company. They do it incredibly well. They have a more closed ecosystem of software that they know how to do and they know how to work. Their developer tools are absolutely fantastic, and like their development language Swift, and it's getting more and more efficient. So I would bet on Apple on a more refined, classier system. But I think Oculus and now rolled into Meta had such a lead and doing such an incredible job, because they really did. If you look at the transformative moment of headsets, I really think it's the Meta Quest 2. I think we're living in it. So that moment Apple released the first iPhone, I think we're living in that moment with the Meta Quest 2 that was formerly launched as the Oculus Quest 2. I think that's really the moment where everybody puts it on. It's wireless. It does not require a $2,000 computer that you plug into. It has good battery life. It's fairly lightweight, and you can access the world from it untethered. That to me is the moment that people will look back on and really think like that was it. Oculus was the company, and this was really the device that changed people's perspective. And then I think it's going to be a rapid race now of Apple doing it better, and then Meta coming out with a new headset, and then you have new entrants and new competitors coming out. And I like the crowded space. A crowded space with a lot of entrants means the hardware gets better and better, really
and great
fast.
Innovation happens.
So I think Apple's headset will probably come out by 2024, end of 2023, depending. They push it off again and again and again. But I think that will be.
Do you think we'll get an announcement at WWDC this year?
I no longer make bets on that. We wrote an article on it. We published it for this last event, and everybody thought it was going to happen. They were going to announce Reality OS, I think, but it did not. So people have speculated basically and guessed every single one for like the last 3 years.
Yes.
So if I predicted, I would be wrong, I assure you. But I hope. I mean, I'm optimistic about it because I think it will be. I think developer tools will be better. I think the form factor will be better. I think processing speed will be better, especially by version 2 of Apple's headset. I think will be a remarkable device. But I think I give credit to Meta. I mean, obviously they were Facebook. They went all in, changed their name entirely to support that. So
people have code names of Apple Glass, right? Their augmented reality side, and Apple has said publicly that they actually don't have plans in going into the metaverse. They want to keep things in the real world with augmented reality. Mm-hmm. Do you believe that statement, or do you think that they're just saying that for now and then they're going to be pushed into or forced into or going to get into the metaverse world and create their own world?
I don't believe that statement at all. I think because the metaverse again is not pure virtual reality. Pass-through mixed reality can all be part of the metaverse, which is kind of 3D internet. It's the evolution of the internet. And so I think they will be very much in Web3 world. I think they'll very much be in the wearable space. I think they'll have full mixed reality where it's both, pass through, augmenting the world around you, but also being able to close that off entirely to create a fully immersive virtual reality environment. I think they'll be competing, neck and neck with that world, because you can't. Mixed reality is great, and mixed and augmented reality is absolutely phenomenal. I think it's already seen a ton of uses. But virtual reality is its own beast, and it's an incredible experience. And I don't see why Apple wouldn't enter into that space, but also push the limits, expand. Maybe have 2 separate wearable devices. One is more of almost glasses, small form factor, incredible, kind of new innovations in terms of glass projection. They've even talked about patents around retinal projection directly onto the eye. Really crazy innovations that their patents are being filed for. So I would imagine they're going to compete right along with it. I don't know why they wouldn't. I hope they do.
Meta's already come out with their Ray-Ban glasses, mm-hmm. and at least from my perspective, I haven't seen a lot of people with them. I have met one personal friend that had them, and he doesn't really use them. Do you think when Apple comes out with their glass that, again, that's going to push it where people are going to be excited about it? Or do you think that this is technology that they are going to come out with it, but a lot of this is just too soon, like VR headsets?
I mean, Google Glass was obviously too soon. And I think that not enough people were talking about augmented reality and virtual reality at the time, and then the implementation and support network for it was a bit limited. And so I think that when Apple releases theirs, I think their first foray into it won't be glasses, like similar glasses. I think it's going to be more virtual reality headset type. And so I think when they do go into the market, they're fantastic about, again, their closed distribution for like a developer perspective is you can launch on iOS and easily launch on their watch, like watchOS. I think that's a good example, is understanding what is the relationship between your iPhone and your Apple Watch, and how do those correspond from a developer side, from a design side, how you might use the two differently. I think when it comes to more of the augmented reality side, and let's say you have really small form factor glasses you can wear all day, then I think it would be an extension very similar to what happened with Apple Watch. Adoption, there was excitement, there were a lot of people talking about it. Adoption wasn't necessarily astronomical and through the roof. Not every person on the planet is wearing them, but I think there's going to be a growing and growing network when that launches, again, similar to Apple in terms of utility apps. You might combine the two, especially if you do pass-through. You can have the time or push notifications popping up within your display whenever you want. I think things like that to augment the reality around you, I think those will be very useful and lean a bit more towards the utility side if they come out with true kind of just pass-through glass type of lenses.
It's crazy to me how Apple now has become the #1 sold watch in the world, and it's what they do.
Yeah, and now like the displays, you could like Hermes and all these different brands have all released like their
versions,
custom version of displays. Because it's just, it's a utility that, they have dominated the smartphone market so beautifully. And when they do something, they tend to do it better than average. I definitely have more faith in them than Google on a first launch into a market. But Google was the first to get there. They throw a bunch of money and amazing development resources at it. But I think there's a bit more of a refined brush with the way Apple approaches it.
One more question on this topic, since I kind of always veer us off into tangents. Yeah. What can people expect out of Spain and France with the Metaverse, Meta?
We'll generally see the idea as a whole with Horizons is building true metaverse environments where people can go to do everything they do in the real world in the digital world. And that's really, I think, all what we're talking about with Meta Horizons is trying to expand into these markets, experience what life is like, as a Parisian, for example, and people being able to interact and engage with each other in those environments. So when you look at, I think they're calling it Horizon Worlds. But it's really trying to do that. It's building worlds based off of a replication of what's in the real world versus like VR chat. It seems like with Horizons and that Horizons World piece is they're leaning more towards the replication and the digital twin of the real world, a bit more so versus like VR chat, which is one of the larger, if not the largest, kind of metaverse social experience. There's quite a few out there, but that's pure fantasy.
Yeah, more cartoony,
you can
if you
create
will.
any world that you want. And what Horizons is doing is they're really building out, again, spending $10 billion, is building out systems to allow other people to create their own worlds. And I think that's really exciting, and that's something I'm really happy to see that they're funneling money into, because the long term, I don't want one entity to control or define what the metaverse is. I don't want it to be a replication of the world around us. It's everybody being able to contribute to that world, be able to contribute their digital footprint on what that landscape and social environment is. So like where we are today, I would love for us to be able to create an environment in the world that we can create ourselves, invite people to freely in an open source platform. So we'll see.
Fascinating. I love it. Mr. Taylor, how do people get a hold of you guys?
You can check us out at wondour.com, WONDOUR.com. And obviously text any questions that you may have to our community line at 702-602-8802.
And we will answer those questions in future videos. And if you haven't already liked this video, consider subscribing to our channel. And we actually have our URL now, which is youtube.com/Wondour, which has been exciting, and seeing all of the people excited about our channel. It's awesome, and people are pumped, whether we're talking about the metaverse stuff, or whether it comes to our events, or whether it comes to the product side and the development side with Emily. It's awesome. So subscribe, guys, and until our next episode, we'll see everyone soon.